He never planned to be the center of attention that evening. In fact, he didn't even want to attend the event in the first place. He liked quiet places, calm moments, and the kind of silence where a person could hear their own thoughts. But his friend kept insisting, saying it would be good for him to step out for a while. After almost an hour of gentle pressure, he finally agreed. Maybe some fresh air and simple conversation would not hurt. The community hall was bright and full of activity when they arrived. People of all ages were there, talking, laughing, and catching up with one another. It was the kind of space that felt warm the moment someone walked in. Decorations hung from the ceiling, soft lights glowed around the room, and there was a gentle buzz that made everything feel alive. In one corner of the hall, almost unnoticed, sat an old upright piano. Its wooden surface was scratched in a few places, and the bench looked a little uneven. But it still stood proudly, as if it had seen many years of music and memories. He noticed the piano the moment he stepped inside, but he acted like he didn't. He kept his eyes forward and walked in with his friend, pretending not to care. But inside, a small part of him felt a pull toward it. He had spent countless hours practicing on a simple keyboard at home, and whenever he saw a real piano anywhere, even an old one, he felt something warm spread through his chest. They found a place to sit, and he tried to blend into the background. He listened to people talk about their week, their families, their plans, their worries. Every now and then he smiled politely or nodded quietly. His friend did most of the talking, as always, and he didn't mind that. It gave him space to observe the room, to take in the energy around him. Time passed, and the event continued smoothly. People were enjoying small activities, sharing stories, and occasionally walking past the piano without giving it so much as a glance. He noticed that too. It almost made him laugh inside. Something so beautiful sat in the corner, ignored, waiting for someone who understood it. After a while, one of the organizers asked the crowd if anyone wanted to share something, maybe a poem, a joke, a small performance, just for fun. The request was lighthearted, and people responded with cheerful laughter. A few kids volunteered to do little skits, and their playful mistakes made the audience laugh more. Then someone standing near the piano jokingly said, "Does anyone here know how to play? Even a simple tune will do." The voice was casual, almost teasing. A few people looked around, but no one stepped forward. Most people assumed that if anyone could play, they would have volunteered earlier. His friend turned to look at him immediately. "You can play," his friend whispered with a grin. "Go on, just for a minute. It'll be fun." He shook his head at once. His heart skipped a beat, and he felt heat rise in his cheeks. He never played in front of strangers. Not once. Music was something personal for him, something he kept close. It wasn't a performance. It was a private conversation between his hands and the keys. But his friend nudged him again. "Come on, just a small tune." No pressure. He still refused. He looked away, pretending to focus on something else. He hoped the moment would pass, that someone else would volunteer. But then another voice joined a person from across the room who overheard his friend. "Oh, you play? That's great. Come on, give us something." Now people began noticing him. A few eyes turned in his direction, not in a harsh or demanding way, but just curious. That made him even more nervous. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, not even a little bit. His friend leaned closer and whispered softly, "No one expects anything fancy. Just touch the keys. Just play like you do at home. It'll be fine. I promise." He looked at the piano again. It felt like it was staring back at him. A part of him wanted to walk to it, to feel the keys under his fingers, to let the familiar comfort settle inside him. Another part of him wanted to run out of the hall and avoid the entire moment. He took a deep breath. Maybe it wouldn't be that bad. It was just a small room, a friendly crowd. No judges, no flashing lights, no pressure. Just people having a casual evening. Slowly, he stood up. He felt dozens of eyes shift toward him again. His palms were already getting warm, and his steps felt heavier than normal. His friend gave him a gentle pat on the back. "You've got this," he whispered. He walked toward the piano, trying to keep his breathing steady. The hall wasn't completely silent yet. People were still talking quietly among themselves. In a way, that helped him feel less tense. It meant no one expected much. When he reached the piano, he paused for a moment. He lightly touched the wooden edge, feeling the small scratches and warm surface. It wasn't a perfect instrument, but it felt familiar in its own way. He slowly sat on the uneven bench, adjusting himself until it felt somewhat stable. He placed his hands on his knees for a moment, taking one last breath. Then he lifted his hands and placed them gently on the keys. The piano felt cool, almost calming, but right before he played the first note, doubt rushed into him again. His fingers froze. What if he made mistakes? What if someone laughed? What if the sound didn't come out the way he imagined? He had practiced alone for so long that he forgot what it meant to share music with others. He looked down at the keys and reminded himself that he loved this. Not for attention, not for praise, not for anyone else's approval. He simply loved the feeling of creating sound, of turning emotion into something real. Finally, he pressed a single note. A soft, gentle sound echoed through the hall. A few heads turned in curiosity, but most people didn't stop talking yet. That was good. It gave him space to breathe. He played another note, then another, slowly forming a simple melody. His hands shook slightly, but the keys guided him. The room's noise continued around him. Some people barely paid attention. Some smiled politely, and some didn't notice it all. But as he continued, something inside him began to loosen. His shoulders relaxed. His breathing steadied. The music slowly grew more fluid, more natural. It felt like he was slipping into a world he knew well, a world where he didn't have to speak or explain anything. He didn't look at the audience. He kept his eyes on the piano, letting the notes fill the air. He could feel his nervousness slowly fading with each sound he created. And though he didn't know it yet, though he still believed most people weren't paying attention, something was beginning to shift. A few nearby conversations grew quieter. People started turning their heads in his direction without realizing why. The sound of his playing, soft but sincere, was reaching them. He remained unaware of the small changes happening around the room. For now, he was simply a quiet young man seated at an old piano in a busy hall, doing something he never planned to do that evening, letting his fingers tell a story he never dared to speak out loud. Little did he know. This simple moment was about to change the entire mood of the hall, one soft note at a time. He didn't notice how the sound in the hall had slowly changed. What began as scattered voices and soft laughter was turning into a quiet, curious stillness. But he remained lost in the small world between his hands and the keys. At first, he kept the melody simple, almost hesitant, as if he was testing each note before trusting it. But the more he played, the more something inside him began to open up. His fingers, which had trembled earlier, now moved with a steadier rhythm. Not perfect, not polished, but honest. Every sound he created felt like a small step toward confidence, though he didn't realize it. He was still thinking about not messing up. He was still thinking about how he didn't belong in front of people. But the music didn't care about any of that. It simply wanted to flow through him, and he let it. Some people near the front had already stopped talking. A couple of them leaned slightly forward, listening without meaning to. They didn't know who he was, and they didn't expect anything special when he walked toward the piano earlier. To them, He was just a shy young man politely accepting a harmless suggestion. But now, something about the softness in his playing was catching their attention. He didn't look at them. He didn't look at anyone. His eyes were fixed on the keys, watching the way the white and black surfaces responded to his touch. The sound felt familiar to him, like a memory. It reminded him of the evenings at home, when the world outside felt too heavy, and he had no one to talk to. On those nights, he would sit quietly with his keyboard, letting the notes speak in place of words. Maybe that was why his music sounded the way it did, gentle, slightly aching, yet warm. It carried pieces of everything he had ever held inside. People listening didn't know that, of course, but they could feel something in the way he played. They didn't know where the emotion came from, but they sensed it, even in the simple tune got as the melody grew. His shoulders loosened further, and his breathing became calm. He didn't dare to play anything complicated, but he began adding small touches, little changes in rhythm, slight pauses, soft increases in volume. These were things he normally did only when he played alone, but here they came naturally, without planning. A few feet away, a young boy tugged at his mother's sleeve and pointed at the piano. The mother turned and listened, then slowly smiled as she realized how peaceful the sound was. Another person who had been speaking somewhat loudly earlier paused mid-sentence, tilting their head as if trying to figure out when the room became quieter got step by step. The hall was changing without him knowing. He kept playing, letting the notes guide him. He wasn't thinking about the people behind him or around him. He wasn't thinking about judgment or mistakes now. Instead, he thought about the first time he ever touched a real piano years ago. He remembered how surprised he felt when even the softest touch created a sound that felt alive. He remembered spending hours practicing the simplest songs, repeating them over and over until they felt like second nature. Those memories flowed into the music. He didn't force anything. He simply allowed himself to feel the same calmness he used to feel when he was alone. In a way, he had forgotten where he was. For a few minutes, the crowded hall felt like a quiet room with a single window and a small lamp. He didn't play to impress. He played because it was the only thing that ever made him feel completely at ease. More people noticed the sudden change in the atmosphere. Conversations grew softer, as if people didn't want to interrupt something delicate. A group of teenagers who had been laughing earlier stopped and listened. An elderly couple near the back exchanged a quick glance, surprised by the gentle emotion in the music. Still, he had no idea his friend, who had encouraged him to play, watched from the side with a proud and relieved smile. He wasn't surprised by the reaction. He always knew his friend had a special touch when it came to music. But seeing others finally noticing it made him feel warm inside. The melody shifted again, becoming slightly deeper, more thoughtful. He didn't plan it. It just happened as his mind drifted to moments he rarely shared with anyone. Like the lonely evenings when he felt invisible at school. The times he wished someone would ask how he was truly feeling. The small victories that meant nothing to others, but kept him going. All of that was wrapped inside his music. Soft notes filled the hall, moving slowly like a quiet stream. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It wasn't fancy. But it was real. And that realness reached people. One woman placed her hand over her heart without noticing she had done it. Another person closed their eyes for a moment, letting the sound wash over them. A child sat on the floor and simply listened, drawn in by something he didn't understand, but liked. The organizer who had earlier invited people to share something suddenly felt grateful that they had offered the suggestion at all. They hadn't expected anyone to play with such emotion. They thought it would just be a quick moment of fun, something small. But this was different. He continued to play, unaware of the countless eyes watching him now. He didn't know that the room had nearly gone silent, except for the sound of the piano. He didn't know that people had stopped moving, stopped chatting, stopped everything just to listen. If he had known, he might have frozen again. He might have stopped playing out of fear or embarrassment. But since he didn't, he allowed the music to grow naturally, without fear holding him back. His fingers, now completely steady, glided across the keys with a soft confidence. He explored the melody gently, shaping it the way a person might shape clay slowly, carefully, paying attention to the smallest details. Each note seemed to say something he never said aloud. Each pause felt like a breath. He finally allowed himself to take Dot as he neared the end of the small tune he had said he would play. He let his fingers slow down. The melody softened until it felt almost like a whisper. He didn't want to play too long and make people feel forced to listen. He thought it would be better to stop soon, before anyone grew tired of it. But even as he prepared to stop, he still had no idea how deeply the room had been affected. He gently lifted his hands and allowed the final notes to fade. For a moment, he simply sat there, recovering from the nervous energy he had felt earlier. He expected to hear the normal buzz of the hall, again the voices, the laughter, the movement. But what greeted him instead was something completely unexpected. Not silence, not the silence of disinterest, not the silence of boredom, but a soft, stunned silence, the kind that happens when people feel something they didn't expect to feel. He blinked, confused. He looked up for the first time since he sat down, and his heart felt like it skipped several beats. Nearly everyone in the hall was looking at him. Some with gentle smiles, some with softened eyes, some with expressions that looked almost emotional. He didn't understand why. He didn't know that his quiet, simple playing had touched people in a way he never imagined. And as he sat there trembling again, wondering what had just happened, the room slowly began to react. He didn't know it yet. But this moment, this unexpected moment, was only the beginning of everything that was about to unfold. He sat frozen on the bench, unsure what to do as the room remained completely still. For a moment, he thought maybe something had gone wrong. Maybe he had broken a rule. Maybe he wasn't supposed to touch the piano after all. His heart raced again, the same nervous pressure returning to his chest. He looked at the keys and at the audience, and back at the keys as if trying to find an escape. But the silence in the hall wasn't the kind that came from confusion or irritation. It was deeper, softer, full of something he didn't yet understand. People looked at him not with judgment, but with something closer to wonder. And then finally, someone near the front slowly brought their hands together. A single clap, then another dot, then more dot, and suddenly the room burst into applause so full and warm that he felt his entire body tense in shock. He hadn't expected this, not even a little bit. He had expected people to go back to chatting, laughing, and focusing on the event. He had expected his small, quiet tune to blend into the background. He never thought it would stop the entire hall. The sound of the applause washed over him like a wave, loud and sincere. People weren't just clapping politely. They were clapping with emotion, like they had felt something real, something meaningful. He blinked rapidly, overwhelmed. His hands shook again, but not because he was scared this time. It was something else, something like disbelief. His friend was the first to reach him. He rushed forward with the biggest smile, gently tapping him on the shoulder. "You did that," his friend said quietly, trying not to interrupt the applause. "I told you they'd like it." He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His throat felt tight. He had never received this kind of reaction in his entire life. People had praised him before, small compliments here and there, but nothing like this. Nothing this loud, this emotional, this honest. He gently stood up from the bench, and the applause somehow grew even stronger. Some people stood. Others had soft, warm expressions, like they had just experienced something rare. A few had their hands over their hearts, touched in a way they didn't expect when they walked into the hall a few hours earlier. He didn't know where to look. His eyes moved nervously across the group of faces staring back at him. Some smiled wide. Some looked thoughtful. Some even looked as though the music had reminded them of something important. He gave a small nod, the only gesture he could manage, and slowly stepped back from the piano. The applause gently faded, replaced by soft murmurs. People began talking to one another, but not the same way as before. Their voices were calmer now, quieter, like they were still holding on to the feeling his music had brought them. A woman approached him carefully, as if she didn't want to startle him. "That was beautiful," she said softly. "You're playing." It felt like a story. He lowered his eyes, still unsure how to react. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice almost too quiet to hear. Another person joined. "How long have you been playing?" Someone asked. He hesitated. "A while," he said. "Mostly at home." It felt strange admitting it. He wasn't used to people being curious about him. A man near the back raised his hand slightly and said, "You should play more often. You have something special." Special. He wasn't used to hearing that word directed at him. His friend stepped in, placing a hand behind his back for support. "I've been telling him this for years," his friend said proudly. "He just never believes me." People chuckled softly at that, but it wasn't mocking. It was warm, friendly, the kind of laughter that made the moment feel light. He inhaled slowly. The tension in his chest eased, replaced by an unfamiliar feeling, a mix of relief, pride, and a bit of fear of what this meant. He never wanted attention, but now that it was here, he realized it wasn't as frightening as he imagined. The organizer who had earlier invited people to share something approached him with a grateful smile. "That was unexpected," the organizer said kindly. "In the best way possible. You shifted the whole mood of the hall." He nodded slowly. "I just played something simple," he said. The organizer shook their head. "Sometimes simple things touch people the most." After a few minutes, people slowly returned to their seats, but many continued glancing in his direction. Some whispered softly to each other, not in a judgmental way, but with the kind of curiosity that came from witnessing something meaningful. His friend guided him back to where they had been sitting earlier. "You okay?" his friend asked. He nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure. His heart was still beating fast, and his mind was trying to process everything. "I didn't think they would listen," he said quietly. "They didn't just listen," his friend replied. "They felt it." He stared at the floor, replaying the moment in his head. When he sat at the piano earlier, he had been nervous, unsure, afraid of embarrassing himself. But somehow, the music had taken over. It had hugged the room, softened it, and calmed it. The idea that he had done that felt unreal. More people approached him as the event continued. Not all at once, but one by one. A teenager told him that the music reminded them of a dream they had once. An elderly man said the sound brought back memories from years ago. A young mother said her child had never sat so quietly before. Each comment felt like a small light being placed gently into his hands. He didn't know how to hold them, but he held them anyway. At one point, he stepped aside for a moment, needing a little space to breathe. He walked toward a quieter corner of the hall, away from the crowd. From there, he could see the piano, still sitting under the warm lights. It looked different now, not ignored, not unnoticed. It looked like a doorway that had opened without him expecting it. He placed a hand on his chest, feeling the soft rhythm of his heartbeat. He suddenly wondered what would have happened if he had refused to play. If he had let fear win. If he had stayed in his seat. The entire room would have stayed the same, no stillness, no shift. No moment. It scared him a little to think that something so small, so simple, could change the atmosphere of an entire room. His friend found him again after a few minutes. Thinking too much? His friend asked. He smiled gently. Maybe. His friend leaned against the wall. They weren't reacting to how perfect you played. They were reacting to how honest it felt. He looked at him slowly. I wasn't trying to make it emotional. I was just playing. I know, his friend said. That's exactly why it worked. The event continued around them, people talking, sharing snacks, playing games, but the energy remained softer, warmer than before. It felt as if the entire hall had taken a deep breath and released something it didn't know it was holding. He returned to his seat eventually, but his eyes kept drifting back to the piano. It felt like it was waiting for him again. Not asking, not demanding, just waiting. At one point, a small child approached the piano and touched one of the keys lightly, creating a tiny, curious sound. People nearby smiled at the innocence of the moment. He watched the child and felt something stir inside him. Maybe music wasn't just about skill. Maybe it was about moments, like this moments, that connected people without needing words. He didn't know what the next part of the night would bring. He didn't know if someone would ask him to play again, or if people would simply remember his tune for the rest of the evening. But he did know one thing. For the first time in a long time, he felt seen, not because he tried to stand out, but because he allowed a part of himself to be heard. And without realizing it, the quiet young man who tried so hard to blend into the background had just taken the first step into a chapter of his life he never expected to enter. He didn't return to the piano right away. After all the attention and the soft comments from people around the hall, he needed time for his feelings to settle. The moment he finished playing felt unreal, like something that could only happen in a dream, yet he was standing in the middle of a busy hall, trying to understand why a simple tune had touched so many people. As the event continued, he stayed near the edge of the crowd, listening to the voices around him, trying to blend back into the background. But it was clear that he couldn't disappear as easily as before. Every now and then, someone would smile at him from across the room, or nod gently as if thanking him once again. It was strange. He didn't know how to accept this new kind of attention. He had spent most of his life being the quiet one, the one people forgot was in the room. And now, suddenly, people were remembering him. His friends stayed close, not wanting him to feel overwhelmed. They exchanged small glances, little smiles, and short whispers that helped him stay grounded. You doing okay? His friend asked quietly. He nodded. I think so. Just taking it in? His friend chuckled. It's a lot to take in. The hall was still glowing with soft lights, the kind that made everyone look calm and warm. People moved around, talking to one another, but their energy was different now. It was gentler, more peaceful. Even the children seemed calmer. The whole space felt like someone had laid a warm blanket over it. And he still couldn't believe he had been the one to bring that change. He looked again at the piano on the small stage. The same instrument that had scared him earlier. Now it didn't look frightening. It felt familiar, almost welcoming. A small group of people approached him again, this time more cautiously, as if worried they were disturbing him. One of them spoke softly. Do you mind if I ask? Who taught you to play like that? He hesitated for a moment. No one, really. I learned mostly on my own. On your own? The woman asked, eyes widening slightly. That's incredible. He didn't know what to say. Compliments always made him uncomfortable, not because he disliked them, but because he didn't know how to respond without sounding awkward. I just play what I feel, he finally said. That's exactly why it sounds so real. The man beside her replied. They soon stepped away, not wanting to keep him too long, but their words lingered in his mind. Real. His playing had felt real. Not perfect, not technically impressive, just real. Maybe that was why people reacted the way they did. A little later, the organizer returned. They had a gentle smile on their face and stood with their hands clasped politely in front of them. "I hope you're doing okay," they said. Sometimes a moment like that can be overwhelming. "It's okay," he said slowly. "I'm just a little surprised." The organizer nodded. It's rare to see a room shift like that. And it didn't shift because of the event. It shifted because of you. Those words settled in his heart in a way he couldn't describe. After some time, the lights dimmed slightly, signaling that the next part of the evening was about to begin. People began moving toward their seats, chatting softly as they settled down. The piano still sat at the front, untouched since he last played it. The organizer walked onto the small stage with a microphone in hand. "Thank you, everyone, for such a warm and uplifting atmosphere," they began. "Before we move on, I think we should all acknowledge the unexpected gift we received earlier tonight." He felt his stomach drop. Was the organizer talking about him again? The organizer smiled at the crowd. "We were hoping someone would come forward and play something simple for fun. But we didn't expect someone to bring such emotion, such calm, and such beauty into this room." A quiet wave of soft applause began again, spreading through the audience like a gentle breeze. He felt his cheeks warm and lowered his gaze, wishing he could hide behind something. "He didn't just play music," the organizer continued. "He reminded us how powerful honesty can be, even when spoken through notes instead of words." More applause. More warmth. More attention than he knew what to do with. After a few moments, the organizer stepped aside to begin the next segment of the event. But before they left the stage, they made one last comment. "And I'll say this, if he ever decides to play again, this piano will always be here waiting for him." A few people looked at him again with kind eyes. He felt a deep breath leave his chest. He hadn't planned to play again tonight. Actually, he hadn't planned to play at all. But now the thought of returning to the piano didn't scare him. It felt like a possibility. As the next activity started, some light speeches and shared stories, he sat still, thinking about everything that had happened. The hall was full of gentle noise again, but a part of him still felt connected to the quiet moment earlier. His friend nudged him. "You know," his friend whispered, "if you ever feel like playing again later, I think people would really like it." He didn't answer, but the thought rested in his mind. As the night continued, people kept watching him with small, warm expressions. It wasn't the intense staring he feared earlier. It was more like appreciation, soft, unspoken thank yous. He eventually stood up and walked quietly toward the edge of the hall, not wanting to disturb anyone. He found a spot near a window where he could breathe freely. Outside, the sky was dark and calm, and tiny lights from the street cast soft reflections on the glass. He leaned slightly against the window frame and let the cool air calm his thoughts. He wondered why the music had affected people so deeply. It wasn't a complicated melody. It wasn't a piece from a famous composer. It was just him being himself. Just a sound that carried pieces of his quiet life. Maybe that was enough. His reflection stared back at him from the window. Not confident, not bold, just a young man trying to understand how something so small could make people feel something so big. He didn't realize someone had walked up beside him until he heard a voice. "I hope I'm not interrupting." He turned and saw the organizer again, holding 2 cups of warm tea. They offered one to him. "Thank you," he said softly, taking it. "I wanted to give you this," the organizer said. "You looked like you needed a little break." He gave a small smile. "I did." They stood quietly for a moment, sipping tea and looking out the window. The silence felt comfortable, like the soft silence after a meaningful conversation. The organizer eventually spoke again. "Did you know some people almost cried during your playing?" He looked down, surprised. "Really?" "Yes, music can do that, especially when it feels honest." He breathed slowly. He didn't think his music was strong enough to make anyone emotional. He only played because it helped him find peace. "You have something rare," the organizer continued. "You don't play to be admired. You play because it comes from somewhere deep." And that's what people felt. He didn't know how to respond. He simply nodded. As more time passed and the night moved on, the activities slowly came to an end. People began packing their things, sharing final conversations, and preparing to leave. But many continued stopping near him to say kind words, simple things like, "Thank you for your music," or "It meant a lot to us." He wasn't used to kindness coming from strangers. Yet each message felt like a soft touch against his heart. When the hall finally became quieter again, his friend walked up to him with a gentle grin. "So," his friend asked, "what do you think? Ready to head home soon?" He looked at the piano one more time before answering. The instrument still sat there, glowing under the last few warm lights of the hall. For a moment, it almost felt like it was calling him, not loudly, not demanding anything, just offering a space where he could be himself once more. And without fully understanding why, he felt the corners of his mouth lift into a small, peaceful smile. "Maybe," he said softly, "I'll play one more time before we leave." That single decision, quiet, gentle, and unforced, would soon change everything about the rest of the night. The moment the applause filled the hall, he felt something inside him shift. It was not pride, and it was not confidence either. It was something softer, something he had never truly felt before, a quiet belief that maybe, just maybe, he had something special to offer the world. But as the noise settled and people slowly returned to their seats, he stood there feeling almost lost. He did not know how to take in all this sudden attention. It felt almost unreal. People continued to approach him with kind words, and every face carried the same warm glow, as if they had all experienced something he never planned to give. Some asked him where he learned to play. Others wanted to know if he played professionally. A few simply thanked him for making their night unforgettable. Every question made him blush a little, because he knew the truth. He had never been taught by anyone. He had never taken a class. He had learned everything alone, sitting in a small corner at home, playing just to calm the noise in his mind. He noticed that many people looked at him differently now. Moments earlier, he was just another person in the crowd, but now they spoke to him like he was someone important. He did not know how to handle that feeling. A part of him wanted to hide, but another part of him felt something warm and gentle grow inside his chest, like a rising light. He stood quietly, letting people talk, letting their words settle one by one. As the hall slowly emptied, a few people remained behind. They seemed to still be caught in the moment, still touched by something they could not explain. One older man approached him and placed a hand on his shoulder. His eyes were soft and a bit watery, as if he had been moved in a way he rarely experienced. The man said something simple, yet powerful words that stayed with him longer than he expected. He said, "You have a gift. Don't hide it." Then he nodded and walked away, leaving him frozen in place. Those words played in his head again and again. He had heard similar things before, from friends or family, but they never felt real to him. Hearing it from a stranger, someone who owed him nothing, someone who was touched only by the music, not by the person, made it feel different. More real, more true. He sat alone on a chair near the piano once everyone had left. The hall felt strangely empty now, yet peaceful. He looked at the piano again, remembering how nervous he had been when he first sat in front of it. He remembered how he almost stood up and walked away. But something had made him stay. Something inside him pushed his hands toward the keys. and the rest had unfolded in a way even he could not explain. He let his fingers rest gently on the wooden edge of the piano. He felt grateful, but also overwhelmed. He had never wanted attention. He had never played to impress. He played because music was the one place where the world felt calm, where he could breathe without fear. But tonight, for the first time, he saw music do something far bigger, something that touched not only him, but everyone around him. He leaned back in the chair and closed his eyes. The night replayed in his mind like a soft movie. He could still hear the applause, still see the faces full of emotion, still feel the warmth in the room when the last note faded. It made him smile without even realizing it. After a few minutes, he finally stood up and walked toward the exit. The cool air outside brushed against his face, grounding him. The night sky was clear, and the street was quiet. He walked slowly, letting the fresh air settle his thoughts. Every step felt lighter than usual. He felt like something inside him had been unlocked. On his way home, he kept thinking about what the older man had said. "Don't hide it." The words felt like a message he had been waiting to hear without knowing it. For years, he had kept his music to himself. He always thought that people wouldn't care, or worse, that they would laugh. But tonight proved something different. It showed him that his music could speak in ways he never could with words. When he reached home, he didn't turn on the lights. He walked straight to the small corner where his old keyboard sat. It wasn't much some keys stuck, and the sound wasn't perfect, but it was where he had spent countless nights teaching himself, letting his emotions guide him. He sat down slowly and placed his fingers on the keys. For a moment he didn't play. He just sat there, breathing, letting the night settle into his mind. Then he pressed a single key, just one soft note. It echoed gently through the room. He smiled again. He didn't know what the future held. He didn't know if he would play at another event, or if he would ever perform for a crowd again. He didn't know if people would remember him or forget him by morning. But none of that mattered. What mattered was that, for the first time in his life, he felt seen, not because of who he was, but because of what he carried inside him. He began to play quietly, allowing the music to fill the space around him. The notes were soft, almost like whispers. He didn't try to make them perfect. He didn't try to impress anyone. He played simply because he loved it. He played because it felt like breathing, and as the melody grew into something warm and peaceful, he realized something important, something that would stay with him forever. His music didn't belong in a corner. Hidden away, it belonged in the world, even if he only played for a handful of people, even if he never stood on a grand stage, even if his name was never known. His music could still touch hearts. It could still bring light into someone's life. And that was more than enough. He closed his eyes and continued playing, letting the melody wrap around him like a soft blanket. For the first time, he allowed himself to dream not of fame or success, but of moments like tonight. Moments where his music found its way into someone's heart and left a gentle mark. The night was silent except for the sound of his fingers gliding across the keys. The world outside didn't know what he was feeling, but he felt it deeply. A quiet joy, a calm acceptance, a new beginning. He kept playing until the early hours of the morning, letting the music guide him into a peaceful place. When he finally stopped, he sat still for a long time, feeling content. And though no one else was there to hear it, that final moment felt just as special as the one in the hall. He whispered to himself, almost too quietly to hear, "I won't hide it anymore." And with that simple promise, a new chapter began, one built not on fear, but on courage, on honesty, and on the quiet belief that sometimes the smallest moments can change a life forever.